Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Global Math Department. My name is Lynda Moore, and I'll be your host tonight. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from Lynda Moore about SmartSlides for engaging students. Would everyone please introduce themselves in the chat window, telling us what you teach, where you teach, and what your Twitter handle is, if you have one. Welcome. We have people from Australia and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Montana and Tennessee and Central Texas. Welcome, everyone. And it looks like we have people from a variety of subject areas, including elementary level math, middle school math, and high school math. So before I introduce our speaker, let me explain a little bit about how these meetings work. These meetings are recorded and are available a few hours after the meeting ends. To view the recording, you would come back to the same URL you used to get here tonight. The global math community prides itself on being friendly and supportive. The chat room is available for topical and general conversation throughout the meeting. I'll catch your questions for the presenter, so don't worry that she won't notice it in the chatter. Tonight, our speaker is Lynda Moore. Lynda Moore has been a secondary math teacher for 30 years, and she's from Georgia. She has taught everything from general math to AP Calculus, and over the past 4 years has been curating her SmartSlides, which she'll be sharing with us tonight. On July 1st, she launched her business, KnowMooreMath, and tonight she will be sharing all sorts of wonderful SmartSlides with us. So thank you very much, Lynda.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We're good.
Okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and start, right?
Yes, you're good to start.
Okay. I just needed that go ahead.
Yep,
So I'm super excited to share with you guys what I call my geometry smart slides. I have these for geometry for Algebra 1, and I'm working on the Algebra 2 smart slides. And then I'm actually going to go backwards to the 8th grade and 7th grade and 6th grade. But tonight what I want to do is just kind of go through each of the slides. And if I get to going fast, y'all tell me to slow down. I decided, I took the idea from HyperDocs, which we've all heard, but Hyperslides are a little bit different just because I used the slides, and I actually did that from a student recommendation because he said to me, how do I know when I move on? So the slides are a great way for the students to figure out, oh, I've done everything on that slide, I move to the next one. So the first few slides are in every slide deck. And so I have my teacher, my textbook right here. Now this textbook is not the full textbook. It is just the section of the textbook of this section. So my lesson tonight is going to be on reflections. And so I also want to talk to you guys about how I use live data and how I loop. Now in Georgia, we have a state test for geometry. So I have all that pressure of making sure that the kids don't forget what I've already taught them. So I have my standard, I have my learning target, and I have my textbook section. And then I created a matrix sort of what I want my students to be able to do. Now, I believe in answering a question from a student at any time. However, I want them to become more self-sufficient. So what I ask that they do is they move a red check to whatever they've tried before they ask me. So I don't deny a student a question. I just answer their question, but I also try really hard to make sure that they're trying on their own. And then I have a lot of different symbols in my SmartSlides. So I have a legend. Now you'll see that you'll see that me and my Bitmoji right here. I have a co-teacher right here with me. So that's who that is. And so I have all these different icons to make sure that parents or other teachers understand all the icons that are in the SmartSlides. So what happens here is I have a Chromebook set in my classroom, and I have direct teaching for the topic of the day. So today's topic is reflections. And so my students really start off with the teacher time. And research shows, I know I'm talking to a bunch of math teachers and you guys know this, but research shows that high school students can listen to their teacher for about as many minutes as they are old. So I teach primarily 16, 17-year-old students. So therefore, I have about 16, 17 minutes for them to really listen to me. So I jam pack that time with what I call very focused teacher time. So I have a vocabulary link, which is Flippity. I'm sure y'all are all familiar with Flippity, but what it does is it gives you flashcards. And so the kids can, and I ask that the kids look at these every day. You can play games, you can do a matching, you can do a word cloud, just, of all the different terms that are in the unit that I'm teaching. So I ask that my students work on that a little bit each day. And then I have very specific examples. Now I have a paperless classroom except for my guided notes. Now my guided notes are those predetermined teacher time problems that I do. And I didn't pull that up, but if you give me just a second, I will pull that up. And so my note-taking guide is right here. And I'll show you what it looks like so you guys can get a good understanding. I also give them like a QR of the vocabulary terms right here, but I'm on lesson 3 of unit 1. So let me get there real fast. And I should have done this before, but so here's my lesson 3. I give them a little checklist. Now, this is what they actually write on as they go through. So the meat of the lesson is how to reflect over the x-axis, the y-axis, and y equals x. And so having said that, it's important for my students not to waste time copying down or drawing problems. So I give them the guided notes of the problems of the day. And so if I go back to my teacher time, once I've finished the direct instruction, now in my classroom, I have 90 minutes for 90 days. And so I don't have a lot of time with my students. But what I choose to do is I ask them right after I finish to go to the teacher time you try. Now the teacher time you try, I have it pulled up right here. And it is a Google form that is a branched Google form. And so I want to show you how this works real quick, if I can. So I am just going to sign in as myself here. And so after I've taught my problem, I ask my students to complete one problem. Now, this is the way that I use live data. So what I want my students to do is directly after me teaching them, I want them to show me that they've learned how to reflect over y equals x. So let's say that we're going to choose the wrong answer. I think D is the wrong answer. So I'm going to hit next. And what happens is I'm giving my students a video of me teaching the problem that they just missed. And so it's a little animated. I use Camtasia for my video making. I started off with Screencastify, but I kind of outgrew that. I wanted animation. And so I choose Camtasia. So once my students finish watching the video, they click the next, and then it gives them a new problem to try. Now, in my classroom, as I'm watching them do these problems, I have a touchscreen Chromebook that I watch the live data come in. So, of my class of 30 students, I've got maybe 20 that get that first problem right, and they move on through the SmartSlides. They don't see the second problem. They don't have to watch the video. But the ones that don't get that first problem right, I give them a second opportunity. And in my classroom, if they miss the second problem, then I go over to them and I communicate and say, hey, let's revisit this reflections. Let's make sure that we understand it. In my school, high school students necessarily don't like to ask a lot of questions. So I'm not sure if you guys, have that in your school, but my high school students won't necessarily, it's not cool to ask a math question. So that's live data number one. My students submit, and what happens is, now that's not for a grade, but the students will get immediate feedback on whether they've gotten it right or not. So after they finish the teacher time and the teacher time you try, I give them a minute to share. And my state test is made of multiple choice questions and constructed response questions. So here I'm going to ask my students to move the lime green dot to the correct choice. And then I'm going to ask them to actually click and to construct a response here. Now, I want to point out two things. Thing number one, do you notice that this is the translations? So this was yesterday's lesson. So I'm teaching reflections today, but I'm actually asking them with a partner to talk about yesterday's lesson, which is a great way of looping. And I call this just think, pair, share slide. And I give them just a few minutes. I time them. They have 8 minutes. They have 2 minutes alone to answer the lime green. And for those of you that are fans of Google Classroom, the reason that it's lime green is because I can look at all of my students and see, a quick percentage in my head if they've gotten it right or not, or if that may be something that I need to revisit. So with my constructed response, I want them to actually pair up. I have high top tables in my classroom. And so I ask them to pair up with a table mate, and they construct their response together. And I do this little flex group seating. So everybody switches in my classroom with seating about every 2 weeks. So you're not always working with the same partner. So I hope that makes sense. And so now all of that is on every one of the SmartSlides, and there are 94 of them for the geometry curriculum. And then I have different things that I'm just trying to remind them of. I have different links right here, Math IXL. They can just go and practice. They're pretty interactive. They ask them to do little things. But slide 9 is like the meat of the lesson. And so that being said, if they click on this Google Drive icon, what happens is it makes a copy for the students to learn the rules of reflecting over the X and the Y and the Y equals X. Now, I do that for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, my students live with their cell phones. They take them to the bathroom with them. So if I can get that image on their cell phone, then what a great way for them to study. So a lot of times, and we have red zone, green zone in my high school, so they can look at their phone on the way to class as the day before the test or whatever. So I really do like that. So anything that's important that I want them to learn or memorize, I need for them to know those rules. I make it sure that they make a copy of it in their Google Drive, which in turn puts it on their phone. And then we go through a couple of things. Now, I have scattered through the SmartSlides. I have some YouTube videos. I am slowly replacing those videos with my own videos, but my YouTube videos are basically for students that didn't understand during the teacher time, or if they just kind of want to hear it again. So then we get to the practice problems. Now we're on slide 11, and they've gotten some feedback, immediate feedback from me, but we haven't taken a grade or anything like that. So I want to make sure that as you look at this example, my math friends, I want to remind you that x-axis, reflection over the x-axis, is one of the easiest ones. So you'll notice that I offer no help in this example. So I want my students to be independent and try this example. But you'll notice that the very next slide is y equals x. Now that's a little bit more challenging. And as I have created the SmartSlides, I have to tell you that I have all these favorite things. I also do an exit survey. And one of the things that my students tell me that they love the most are these little GIF files. So what you'll notice is that I have my Bitmoji right here, and you see how these are kind of darkened out, but these are in bold. And remember, this is the more challenging of the reflection problems. So when I click on this, it's just an animation that I've created. And what happens is it plays on repeat. And so what I'm doing is, for my students, they get to see step by step how to do the problem. And one of the greatest things that I love about these is there's a pause button. So if a student wants to, see the next step, and then they want to pause, they can do that. Or if they're following along in their guided notes, then the pause button is really amazing, especially in my high school classroom where I have so many different levels of students. I have the students that hardly need me at all, and then I have the students that need to hold my hand with every single step that they do. And this is a really great way for me to allow for my students to kind of move at their own pace. So what I do is, after I finish teaching the teacher time, I actually show the GIF file that I've made on my big board in my classroom. And now my students are free to click on the Bitmoji and watch it anytime they want to, and they do. Many of them will put it on pause and try to practice a problem. But the GIF file is one of my favorite parts of the SmartSlides. And in each slide deck, there's at least there's one or more GIF files, and the students really enjoy them and they look forward to them. And if you're wondering, I made these GIF files from just Google Slides with, the stop animation feature. It's pretty easy to do. I'm going to go ahead and click out of the GIF file. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you down to the next example. Now, remember how we talked about, reflection over the x-axis is pretty easy. Then we've got reflection over y equals x, and I sort of helped them out with that problem. And now we have what I call the student you try. So I want you to look at the slides, and you'll notice the pencil icon. So what happens when my students click on the pencil icon, they don't actually put the answer in the slide, they put it in a Google form. And of course, the reason that they put that in a Google form is because that's live data number 2. So every single day I get data to see how well my students are understanding, and it's not for a grade yet. They're just practicing. So what I do is, if my students have done all of this so far and they're still missing the problem, I'm looking at the live data as it's coming in, and then I go over to that particular student that's missed, and I don't wait for them to ask questions. I just make sure that I go over to them and say, hey, let's revisit this problem. And then I move toward, I have another YouTube video, and then I have some more little practice problems. And you'll notice that this one is not in the rules because there is no specific rule for x equals -2, reflection over x equals -2. So what I do is I ask them to make sure that they learn the rules that they can, but some problems don't have rules. They have to make sure that they can reflect. Same thing with y equals 1. And you'll notice the scaffolding here. So I've highlighted the line here, and I've given them the plotted figure. But in the next example, the line is not highlighted, and I didn't give them the figure. So I'm trying to build confidence, but I'm also not expecting them to do it all on their own. So I do offer a lot of scaffolding in the SmartSlides. I kind of give them help so that they are building confidence a little bit. And then I have another YouTube. Now the YouTube videos are pretty much by choice. I don't ask my students that if you're getting everything right, you don't have to watch the YouTube videos. But as we all know from teaching our students, sometimes just hearing it from a different perspective will help our students. And then I'm going to actually ask them to write the rule. So remember, in this lesson, I'm concentrating on reflections, x-axis, y-axis, and y equals x. And so you'll notice that these have the very specific rules that we've been talking about. And so I'm wanting them to write the rule. On my state test, we have technology enhanced questions. So that brings me to the second piece of looping in my SmartSlides. So remember how we talked about this lesson is reflections. Yesterday's lesson was translations. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually ask them to drag and drop appropriately. And each SmartSlide deck has a different kind of drag and drop that I've just kind of made in Google Slides. And then we get to what I call the ticket for understanding. Now, the ticket for understanding is really important because that's kind of the quick formative assessment to see not just one problem, but did they get the idea of the lesson? So I actually have this opened for you with the ticket for understanding. And I just want to real quickly show you, I have some colleagues that I teach geometry with, and they get the benefit of, I've made all this and I share it with them. And so I give 5 questions in the ticket. 4 are multiple choice, and 1 is a constructed response question. Now, constructed response question, I have gone in, and it's so important to me that my students get immediate results. I was kind of, before I really got into the technology world about 5 or 6 years ago, I was the teacher that always was very well prepared for my lessons, but that stack of papers, it just kind of waited. And so I want to make sure that they get to see their grade. And also, my high school students, if they make a 60, they're not looking at their mistakes. They're going to take that 60 that's written on the paper, they're going to stuff it in their book bag, and it's never coming back out. But what I found with Google and Google Forms is that the kids will go, oh, why did I miss that? And that makes my heart happy, because if they're looking at their mistakes, that's very good. So I've made all of the tickets for understanding self-grading. So I make sure that it grades and it gives my students their grade immediately. Now I want to show you the second part of this. And I don't show the students the grade until after they do the self-assessment. In every lesson, I actually have 2 self-assessments, and I made this one real simple. They just get to choose, I need more help, I got it, or I'm not really sure. And then I give them just a question, just an idea of, hey, do you have any questions for me about this lesson? Now, I do this before my students see their grade, because my high school students like to play the blame game sometimes. Oh, Miss Moore, you didn't really teach us that, or I didn't really understand. And I want to know how they feel before they see their good or bad grade. So I ask for a quick self-assessment in the Google form. Once they submit the Google form, immediately they get their grade. So we do a ticket for understanding every day. It's always 5 questions, and those questions are very clearly related to the teacher time problems that I have physically taught them, like the direct teaching of my class. So as they go through the SmartSlides, you'll see that they've done quite a few things before they've gotten to the ticket. And then the next slide is what I call the work session. Now, in my county in Georgia, I have we're kind of we're the largest county in Georgia, or land county in Georgia, but we have very economically disadvantaged students. So a lot of them don't have internet at home. So everything that I'm showing you, my students do in my classroom, but I don't do traditional homework. So what I choose to do is I give them a choice between an interactive work session like this, where they're going to plot and reflect, or I give them a worksheet. And that worksheet, I don't print it for them, but they're welcome to print it somehow if they want to, or they are welcome to, draw the graphs and answer the questions. The worksheet has 25 questions. The interactive activity usually is a little shorter than that. But this is student choice. So they're either going to choose the worksheet or they're going to choose the interactive activity. And then remember how I said we have very specific we have an EOC in Georgia for geometry. So my students have to remember everything that I've taught them. And y'all, I apologize. This is from South Park, but I didn't know it was from South Park. Because I don't watch that. It was the right GIF file that I found. But I choose to loop with two truths and a lie, be the teacher, and silent skill. So I want to go through each one of those. Now, each one of those, 2 truths and a lie, be the teacher, silent skill, are in every single slide deck that I give my students. So the 2 truths and a lie is in the form of a Google form, and I can open this for you. The Google form is just a real quick way to ask them a question, and it's from prior knowledge. So now remember, this is lesson 3 in my classroom. So I'm just asking them an area question, and I ask them not only to tell me which one is the lie, but also I want them to justify why they think that statement is a lie, because I don't want my students to get in the habit of just guessing. So they do a 2 truths and a lie in a Google form every day. My students really like the 2 truths and a lie, and it brings a lot of conversation in our classroom. And then, error analysis is so very important in math. So here's just a review algebra question. And of course, the distributive property is what's the problem here. And I actually don't want my students to choose, but I want them to construct a response here. And so I want them to explain to me what's wrong with the problem. Now, I don't go in, and my students don't get a specific grade for this, but we have a conversation about it, and they work at getting better with their constructed response. Be the teacher. In the beginning, they'll say, okay, so it's not 8, it's 48. And then I have to work with them and help them construct their response with, okay, so it's the distributive property. And then the last looping that I do is called silent skill. And I don't know, Lisa, that I had been teaching for 30 years, so I'm kind of old, but silent skill is like the old black and white movies. There's no volume to the quick little video, but I ask my students to watch the video and then complete the problem. Now, this is a translation problem, so it's a looping from some other skill. 2 truths and a lie, be the teacher, and silent skill are all from past units or days. So it's a way for me to be able to build their remembering of the standards that I've taught them. And then I have this little slide. And what happens is if I click on this, it's a what's bugging you Google form. Now, what that means is it is the only Google form. It's real short. What questions do you still have about the lesson? And what I do is I have a Google add-on to this, and the Google Forms add-on, it'll load in just a second, and you'll see that I actually have an Apple Watch. So I have it mirrored to my iPhone, which is mirrored to my watch, which means that this is the only Google form that alerts me anytime a student fills this out. In my classroom, I get to read the question from the watch. And so I really like this because I don't say, oh, Lee had a question. I just say, hey guys, have you ever thought about? And I don't call out that student. And I have a lot of kids that ask really great questions. So I kind of use this as my students are putting away their Chromebooks every day, we kind of reflect on some questions, and I just randomly call out some of the questions that have been asked and we answer them. And then the last smart slide of every slide deck is another self-assessment. Now you'll see that this looks a lot like the very first slide. I teach with Bitmojis, so I ask my students to tell me how they feel, not necessarily a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but I want them to place a Bitmoji in there that expresses how they feel about the lesson. And what I've learned is there's not a single high school student that doesn't love their own Bitmoji. And so I really enjoy that. In fact, that's the first lesson of my whole class. I teach my kids how to make Bitmojis, and then I give them different emotions: frustrated, confident, happy, sad, confused. And they pick out different Bitmojis of themselves, put them in Google Photos in their school account, and then they just pull them down whenever they want. With the self-assessment at the end, I ask them to answer a question or 2 or 3 questions. I always ask them to do something, and then I ask them to move something to tell me how they feel about it. They got it, they didn't get it, or they need more help. So it's a great way to be able to do that. I hope I'm not going too fast. So that's a whole smart slide deck. And then I wanted to real quickly show you, this is my answer for how do you study for a math test. So this is the review for all of Unit 1. So I want to just real quickly show you this. I do remember that vocabulary that I talked about with the flippity. So I give them the flippity link again, but now in the form of a Google form that's password protected. The password protection is there so that all the vocabulary, everybody does that at the same time. And you'll see that right here, I have the stop sign, which, signifies to my students, but they are password protected, so they can't really open them. Everything in red is mandatory, but everything in the other color just reflects on what else they need to do. So like if I'm talking about, understanding rotations, they click on this, and what I've done is I've given them all the rules of rotating in one slide or one quick way. And I teach my students to be able to screenshot these so that, they can study them as they go. So I really do like the way that I review for the test. My students love the way we review. And then that brings me to my practice test. Now, I don't use any paper in my classroom except for my guided notes. My guided notes are the only paper. My practice test, I let them do to mastery. So for example, if I'm going to give the unit test on a Friday, I give them the unit review menu like on a Tuesday, so that it will, they have time to go through it. And then I have another little set of review problems. One of my favorite things about this is from the parent perspective, if it's hard for a parent to say, my kid doesn't know what to do when I've given them all these different options. So I really do like that. And when I have, parent conferences or parent teacher days or whatever, and I show this, parents really like the fact that they get so much immediate feedback. And there are other little things, and each slide deck looks a little different, but I think I've gone over the guided notes. I think that's it. Now each slide deck has the same components that I've just gone through, but they all look a little different. Let me just real quickly show y'all a different one real fast. So if I picked compositions, for example, and I pull up the slide deck, you'll see that they're similar but different, because I have to do I have to put the little decorative spin on it. So I made these look like a sheet of paper, but they all have the same teacher time, the think, pair, share, and then they have the GIF file. And so here's the GIF file right here. So anyway, I don't know if y'all have questions, or Lee, are you still there? Did I bore y'all?
No, I think we're like all in awe of all the work that you did.
Yeah.
So just a couple of questions. So I just want to clarify. You said that you have 90 minutes each day with your students for like a half a year. So is that block schedule?
It is. And I hate block schedule, but my principal loves block schedule. So I have 90 days with 90 minutes. Now I have some teachers that have actually used my SmartSlides, and they have like 50-minute classes or 45-minute classes. And what they do is a slide deck every 2 days. So it kind of works out. But I do a slide deck a day.
Okay. And then how many slides are in your, like a typical slide deck?
I would say about 20. Well, this one has 26. And this one has 27. So let's say 25.
Okay. Let's see. There's some other questions. Let's see. Just how long does it take to create something like this? Because obviously this, like you said, is like a class. How long? It looks like it took a long time to put all that together.
Well, my first time of doing it, it took me a long time, and now I can make a slide deck from start to finish in about an hour. But I do make them. This is kind of my release. When I first started, I shouldn't tell y'all this, but my first lesson that I ever did digitally, you know what I did? I scanned in a worksheet, I drew text boxes on it, and I made my kids type in the text boxes. And I was so proud of myself. And then I was like, wait, I'm supposed to be making it easier for the kids. And hence the SmartSlides have evolved.
Okay. Let's see. The only other question, I guess, is somebody said, do you make all these on vacation, or like, work on
no, I actually, it's funny. I can't make them at school, because if I make them at school, I get interrupted. But now I have to tell you, I'm pretty old, and I've been teaching for a long time. So I have a 22-year-old and a 17-year-old. So my children are older, and this is what I do. So I have all of geometry and all of algebra completed. I just happen to be showing geometry tonight. And the algebra slides are super cool. I'm sure that you guys have seen the reveal tool. Let me just, can I show something real fast? I know we didn't talk about it, but
no, you still have some more time, so you
okay. I just want to show y'all. This is super cool to me. I love this so much. So this is one of the new things that I've added since I have been doing the algebra slides. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to teach here in this example, y'all. Can y'all see my screen? Lee, can you see
Yep,
my
we're
screen?
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Awesome. So what I'm trying to do is I am teaching them how to solve the problem, but really I wanted them to show their steps and I want them to show the justification. So watch what I did. I also don't want to leave the kids the kids that struggle, I want them to be able to have a release. So I made this super cool magnifying glass. So when you move it, I just move it up and then I move it over with the arrow key and it shows if they've gotten the answer correct, which is kind of cool for scaffolding. And the SPED students really like that because they can get it right too. And so, we can always learn from the answer as well. But I really love that. So I have, the reflection slide that I showed y'all tonight doesn't have that tool, but a lot of them do have that tool. And that's just layering in Google Slides.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions for Lynda at this point? I want to make sure I didn't miss any of them. I think I got most of them earlier.
I see that Melissa asked, do students talk to each other when working through the slide decks? So my students are at tables of 4. I have high top tables, Melissa, and it is individual and I go around to each table. I spend my time in my classroom as they're working on these SmartSlides, helping the students that struggle. And it's not locked down, no talking. So if somebody wants to lean over and ask a question, they can do that. But they cannot talk during the ticket. And I also do my test on Lockdown Browser, of course, with Google Forms. So I don't grade anything by hand. I grade everything on the SmartSlides. So any time that I put into the SmartSlides, I kind of make up for with the not grading. And I see, so do you lecture in class? I do lecture. That was the teacher time that we talked about in the beginning. What other questions, Lee, am I missing?
I think I saw somebody talking about if I purchase this, do I have to purchase it once or repurchase every year?
So that person should email me.
Okay.
I'm just now getting started, so you want to get in on it while it's getting good before I make all my rules. But right now, it's one and done, so you can purchase, and then any updates you get them, for free. Yeah. If you have interest, and I should say that I do have the geometry ones completely done for sale. I have the algebra ones completely done for sale, and for anybody that wants to learn how to create, I also teach a Google how-to class. So if you want to know how to make the magnifying glass or how to learn how to make some of your own lessons, you guys should email me.
Can you tell us your email?
Sure. It's KnowMooreMath. Let me type it. It's KnowMooreMath @gmail.com.
And
if you guys...
You have a website? I can link that in the chat window as well.
I do. It's KnowMooreMath.com.
All right, let me put that in the chat window.
Yeah. Now my website, it's a work in progress, and just know that I'm a math teacher and I'm working on things. Yes, you can just purchase the template. Y'all just email me with specific things that you want, and I'll email you guys back. Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow I will email you guys back and answer all the questions.
I have a question. So what do you think your students like best about using the SmartSlides?
Honestly, they don't have to listen to me for an hour. That's what they like best, because students don't like to be, they don't, when you give a worksheet or when you stand at the board and I used to teach for 20 years, I taught, I do, we do, you do. I stood at the board and I did the problems, then I did it with them. And I think that they like that they can move through at their own pace. And something that we haven't talked about tonight, Lee, is my administrators love these because everybody is doing something different, and I have not one single kid with their head down. Nobody checks out. Everybody can find something that they can do with this, and I really do enjoy that. I feel like everybody can work pretty easily through this. And remember that, because I do direct instruction at the very beginning of my class. After that is over, all of my time is spent going around helping students from the data that I see that need my help. And I work really hard at individually speaking to my students every day. So I'm not necessarily always just talking to them about where they're struggling, but maybe I just want to talk to them about, oh, you need more, let me give you some more so that you can grow.
I had another question. So what about students that are absent? Like how
how amazing is this? Let me show you this. So I'm going to have to switch accounts real fast. But in my classroom, I do this. And you guys know that research shows that if you take your directions and you start with a verb, actually that's the wrong account. If you start with a verb, students understand a little bit more. So like, I'm just going to show you real quickly. So for this is what I taught today. So you'll see that, and I can actually put this in the chat if you guys want me to, but I have my directions by verb. And so for any student that's absent, guys, look, I have the SmartSlide deck right here. And then I have a video of myself of screen sharing where I'm teaching the teacher time problems. So like if a student comes in late, it's recorded right there for them. And then I have a PDF of the problems worked out. So if they miss the guided notes, they can copy those as well. And you'll see like in the next assignment down here, I have the video, I have the PDF, and I have the SmartSlides. And if you go way on down, you'll see I have the exact same thing. So I have the video, the SmartSlides, and then the PDF. So for students absent or students that miss like the first 20 minutes of class, they get to come in, get their earbuds, watch me teach it, and then they get to roll right on. And one of the greatest things about, and I sort of do a flipped classroom, but my instruction is still live. So I teach it live, but I also have a recorded version, just in case. Or if they want to hear it again. I have some students who just, okay, what'd you say? And they want to rewatch the video. And I should also say that my test scores after starting with, my test scores came up about 27 points the first time that I used SmartSlides. And my test scores are pretty good. I have 93% of my students passing the state test. So I'm pretty excited about that. And the state test is like 27 days away. So I'm scared every year, but I'm hopeful that my kids will do well.
All right. Any other questions for Lynda? All right. I don't know if there's any other questions, but I'm sure Lynda is willing to stick around for a little bit longer in case you have more questions.
I am.
For her. And I would encourage you to check out her website and to email her if you have questions that you think of at a later time. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar is going to be posted in about 24 hours, and it does get emailed to everyone who signed up for attending this webinar and those people that actually did attend the webinar also. Next week, the session is the Era of Resource Abundance, and this is actually for grades K to 5. And this session is going to be done by Hillary Kreisberg, and she is talking about finding great resources that truly support student understanding. So I hope that if you know a K-5 educator or work with K-5 educators, that you would encourage them to show up at next week's session. So feel free to stick around if you have questions for Lynda. Otherwise, thank you for attending tonight's session.
Thank you.